I will. For some reason, I am not able to
Oh,
put myself on camera, but I am here, Casey Farmer, Chair of the Rockridge Community Planning Council. And yes, before we launch into the content of the meeting this evening, we wanted to alert you of something soon to come in the Rockridge News front cover, and also there will be emails with the link to how to participate, because this is a call to action. But we were alerted that the site, the infamous College and Claremont Triangle diamond shape site, that the Alameda County Department of Environmental Health is reviewing Shell Oil's request to close the case against Shell and their leaking lust. It stands for leaking underground storage tank. And our board unanimously supported a letter to oppose such of a case closure and to call for the county to stop that attempt. And our rationale is truly that the site is on the City of Oakland's housing element designated site list for potential housing. The Shell is trying to make the argument that there are no current plans for development, so that the case should be closed.
yes, Stuart.
So essentially, we are calling upon community members to submit their own emails or sign a petition. We're working out the logistics of that. So before we launch it,
What are they worried about? I don't know.
if we could be on mute so I could continue my announcement. We are calling on community members to join us in this opposition so that we can have a resounding set of emails that go to the Department of Environmental Health, who makes the decision, but also to the elected officials, including our state senator and assembly member, the Board of Supervisors who oversees that department, and also Dan Kolb, who I spoke with about it yesterday. But just a heads up, that is coming. There is a 60-day public comment period. It has just launched, which was last Thursday, the day we submitted our letter. So there's plenty of time to join in this call to action to recruit your neighbors and fellow Rockridge residents to participate. But for now,
Oh no.
keep an eye out in the Rockridge News, and we'll send emails out to this email list. And if you get the emails from rockridge.org. So I'll leave it at that. I can take any questions briefly. Our letter really explains more detail about this, but the petition language is really kind of a drilled down version of that.
Okay, thanks, Casey. Any real quick questions? I don't want to dwell on this because we have a guest, but any quick questions on that?
Yes.
Well, I guess I'll just comment on, I received the letter because I'm a neighbor, and I know that they said, well, you know, they detailed the history, and they said of various appeals or, you know, environmental issues. And I think the last one was there were plans to develop something there, and that prompted another environmental review or whatever it was, and the plans called for underground parking. And it was when they got into the underground parking issue, that's where they had to open it, and it's still an issue, let's put it that way. So they're sort of saying, oh, if we don't have underground parking, we can just ignore it. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay. All right, well, let's move to our marquee topic. And I just want to kind of introduce this I think I see a few new faces. My name is Ken Rich. I'm on the RCPC board, and I'm the chair of the Land Use Committee. Anyone who's new, going to quickly just give us their name and introduce themselves real quick. I see one or two people.
I'm Kristen Wilson, and I live on Claremont Avenue.
Okay.
I worked on the Rockridge Kitchen Tour, so I know some of the people here.
Okay. Ursula, you look new to me.
I'm new. My name's Ursula. I moved into Rockridge on Oak Grove about a year and a couple months ago.
Great.
And I'm an attorney, and I have worked in land use a bit.
Great. And Chad, I don't recognize you.
Yeah, Chad Thompson. I'm a former land use chair and RCPC
Oh,
chair, but I haven't been involved in a long time.
great.
Recognize a few old faces there that I haven't seen in a while, but yeah, sorry, I have that Chad Oakland thing. I was going to try to get my right name on there, but I forgot how I did it that way. So
Zoom tries to make it hard for you to do things like that.
Yeah.
So, in this committee, we've been talking about different ways to promote more housing development in Rockridge at different scales. We spent a lot of time talking about sort of large scale projects, the CCA project and a potential project on the Ridge site. But I know a lot of people are interested in smaller and medium sized sort of infill. And I think there's nobody who knows that subject better in the East Bay than Patrick Kennedy, who's joining us. And I want to really thank you, Patrick, for taking your time in your evening. I'm actually in New York, so it's very late in my evening, but early in your evening. And I appreciate it. And I think maybe I'll just give you a minute or two, if you could just sort of introduce yourself and what you do. You and I have interacted in San Francisco, but I think you were very active in the East Bay before that. And I think you are getting so again. So anyway, I'll just give you the floor to just kind of say who you are for a moment.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I have been a developer in Berkeley, San Francisco, and Oakland for the last 30 years. Largely started in Berkeley, avoided Rockridge as an article of faith, knowing the anti-development sentiment and the effective organizational abilities of the area. So this is coming as something of a surprise to me. I have been building in San Francisco for the last 5 or 6 years, built a couple high rises and mid rises over here, but have returned to Berkeley in the last year and a half and have 6 projects going in Berkeley now, including a 40-unit housing project for the homeless, a 11-unit project on a 4,000 square foot site, and a 15-unit project on a 3,500 square foot site, and a 42-unit project on a 10,000 square foot site. The stuff that we build at Panorama, by the way, my firm's name is Panoramic Interests. I think I saw that Kirk Peterson is a member of your group, and he's probably he probably designs the buildings that I'm most proud of in Berkeley, the Bockenheimer building and the Gaia building. But in any case, our firm builds very high density, car-free, typically housing with extremely efficient, some people say small units, but the motto, or I should say the slogan of our company, Panoramic, is more in less. And we try to build affordable housing close to the things that make cities interesting, which a perfect example is the Rockridge neighborhood. So happy to be here and happy to ask any questions, and feel free to be brutally frank, as the Rockridge neighborhood, in my experience, always has been.
And we still are. So I pasted into the chat a list of sites that we sort of put together when the housing element was happening. So if you all may want to take a look at that. And they range, from the very large couple of them at the Ridge and the CCA site down to, smaller, medium-sized sites, not all of which are, necessarily available, but many of which are on the inventory. And, we spent so much time talking about the large sites, and Patrick, we'd always be curious. Oh, did I not paste it? I'm sorry. There it goes.
Oh, there it is.
I didn't push the button. So, I just want to start with sort of getting your take on what the development environment is economically, where we are in the cycle. My sense is that it's very hard to build right now. And sort of allied to that, because it's also financial, there's a lot of interest in this group in terms of making our housing as affordable as possible. And so if you maybe want to just start out, and I'm sure we'll just get into a discussion with kind of where we are economically and how that affects affordability right now.
Yeah, well, let's see, the Bay Area generally, when I say the Bay Area, I will refer chiefly to Berkeley, Oakland, and San Francisco, because those are the only areas that I'm familiar with. But Oakland and San Francisco right now, I think, are experiencing what I would call a nuclear winter for development. I think that the barrage of stories about San Francisco and Oakland's problems with crime, drugs, and a non-functioning bureaucracies have made it almost impossible to get anything built, anything of any consequence or size built in the downtown areas. We have been active in Berkeley because Berkeley has maintained I'd say a favorable reputation for new development, largely because of Cal students, I'd say,
Yeah,
but also because, you know, the downtown Berkeley is actually in the midst of a fairly significant building boom, which has, I think, persuaded people that Berkeley may miss some of the travails that Oakland and San Francisco are very much in the process of experiencing. The one exception, I think, to potential development in Oakland is I think Rockridge, where I think you could build small scale, maybe middle income housing, and by middle income I mean, you know, more affordable to your, you know, to your average family than say the $2 million, $1.5 million, or $1.5 million bungalows that Berkeley is, you know, has on the market. But if I were working again in Oakland, that would be the area where I would look. And, you know, your sites on here, that triangular site, the Shell station site, why did the Rockridge people not want to have that developed? It's been a vacant site for the last 10 years, isn't it?
well, I mean, I don't think other people can chime in. I think there hasn't really been opposition recently to development. What's going on now is, you know, the I forget the name of the agency, but they're trying to close it out and not have it cleaned up to residential standards because there's not an active residential
I see.
proposal on it. But we're trying to get it cleaned up because we think it should be developed.
Right.
So
I mean, I asked, we're developing two former gas. I assume it doesn't have PCBs on it, but maybe just hydrocarbons or a leaky diesel tank or something like that. But we're working on sites in Berkeley now that have gotten no further action letters, and it's pretty. We're not digging. We're not going underground, and we're not doing parking. We're not going to disturb the soil. But
so if we don't succeed in getting them to force the cleanup, you actually think that all is not lost if it's just the sort of standard gas station pollutants.
yeah, I mean, I've developed 6 properties on former gas station sites. So, and without incident. So.
One kink on that site is it's actually 2 owners.
Yeah,
Oh, is that right?
but we understand that it's up for sale now.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
The both pieces.
No, Casey, you were the one who relayed that to the group, but it is, I believe both pieces of it are up for sale. So Patrick, you might want to check into that.
Oh, yeah.
But
The
I want
link
to
is
go
there
back.
for people who want to look at it later.
Yeah.
Before we get into general questions, you said that if you were looking, you know, in Oakland, you'd look in Rockridge and you'd be able to do sort of middle income. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? How would you go about doing that, and how can we support that? Because I think it's something that a lot of people want to support.
Yeah, I mean, I sent you those
Yep.
those images of low rise, and I mean, by low rise, I mean 4-story, 5-story buildings, that one of which was in Montreal, another is in Paris. But I think Probably ownership housing would, for sale stuff. But, 4, 5, 6 unit projects on, I assume the typical Rockridge lot is around 5,000 square feet, maybe a little bit less.
Mhm,
That's what they are in Berkeley.
mhm.
And I think there is still a market for ownership housing in Rockridge. I mean, I think it's probably one of the nicest areas in California.
We think so.
Yeah, no, I have read some of the horror stories about street crime and so forth, but I mean, that's something that could be controlled and it may be cyclical or something like that. But I think there are a lot of underutilized properties that could be redeveloped to have 4 or 5 units in a very tasteful way. That particular project that I sent you from Montreal, I thought was a really ingenious
Let me see if I can put it on the
design.
screen. Keep talking for a minute. I'll try to see if
Yeah,
I can.
it had 2 architecture offices on the ground floor, and then I think it had 5 or 6 units of housing on top of it, and yet it was only a 3-story building from the street. I think it went up to 4 in the back. And it was on a tiny lot, 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, I'm looking for your email now. For some reason, I know. I'm looking
But
in.
the other reason why I think Rockridge has potential for that sort of thing is a whole host of developers could undertake something like that, because it doesn't take massively deep pockets to build a 4-unit townhouse or 4 units of flats on a 5,000 foot lot.
So when we've looked at that in the past, and this is interesting that you're bringing this up, we've sort of come to the conclusion that you'd have to have, like, houses are so valuable that the economics just wouldn't work to tear them down. You'd actually have to have a lot where there was a tear down or an empty lot or a very substandard house. I mean, do you think that's true, or would the economics work? Because, these houses are worth $1.5 million, $2 million. And does it really make sense to redevelop one of those lots?
It all depends. You're right. Maybe a $2 million, if it's a $2 million bungalow and it's only 5,000 square feet and you can only get 4 or 5 units on it, probably not. But that 6-unit project that I showed you, that I sent you from Montreal, which also has a couple parking spaces and 2 commercial professional office, you might be able to do that.
Is this let me see if I can share my screen and show folks that picture. 1 second.
Patrick, there's also the typical neighborhood, residential neighborhood, and then College Avenue, which have different zoning and different parking requirements.
Right.
Is this the one, Patrick?
Yeah, that's the one. And if you can click on that and go through the images right there, that gives a very nice idea, a very good.
Mm-hmm. So do folks have questions so far? It's interesting that you're focusing on very small sites rather than, what I would think of as a sort of more typical development site like the Triangle at Claremont College or one of these other.
Yeah.
Those are also small in my mind, but not that
Yeah.
small.
Well, on that site, I forget, I don't know the size of the Shell Station site. Is probably what, between 10 and 15,000 square feet.
Yeah, and it's a challenging shape,
And it's a triangle. Well, you guys could have your Flatiron building there for Rockridge.
Right.
But on a site like that, you could get 50 or 60 apartments or condos or something like that on it. I mean, that's a fabulous site.
So,
A little
Patrick,
noisy.
Patrick, we're not strangers. This is Tom.
Oh yeah, Tom Lalini. Oh, I thought, yeah, you're back.
I'm still alive anyway.
I remember when you went to the UC in, where was it? In not Fresno.
Merced,
right.
yeah. Anyway, so a curious thing about, about that site, right? So would you see only building 4 or 5 stories, trying to stay within wood frame? I mean, there's timber construction, there's other things
Oh, well,
that could go taller. I think the new housing element puts that site at, is it 55 or 65 feet?
oh,
For
does
those
it?
of you who reviewed it,
Oh,
it's got a, if you have a housing element to the project, it gets a density, it doesn't get a density bonus, it gets a height bonus, right?
Yeah.
Which gives you more density.
yeah. Well, I would do whatever I think I could get approved using density bonus. And we are looking at seriously at what's called mass plywood panels, which is a wood construction. And we're doing a
Gas timber, yeah.
mass,
right.
yeah, it's well, it's mass timber. It's and we're doing a 17-story building on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley. But
Does Oakland allow mass timber?
yeah, they're doing a 15-story building at 1510 Webster that's now up to the 8th floor. It's a really exciting technology.
Who's building the project?
Webcore, and the developer is a firm called Oh Wow.
Quite a name.
Yeah, it is quite a name, but yes. But they're doing the most sophisticated, innovative stuff that I'm aware of on the West Coast.
Right.
You know Andy Ball from Webcore. He's their
Right.
CEO. He's a very seasoned, very thoughtful guy. So if he's vetted it, I think it's got a good chance of succeeding.
So I think, from my general perception of the consensus within the community, if there is one, is that, the underutilized, or poorly utilized commercial sites are great targets for getting some impact on the housing side of things within Rock Ridge, as opposed to like tearing down bungalows on
Right.
James
Yeah.
Street or something like that and cramming a few units. Or, like they used to do back in the 60s, they put an 8-pack on a housing site, and the driveway would be on one side and be like a hotel on the other. I don't think anybody's looking for that sort of stuff. Although I don't know that anything in Oakland zoning ordinances or design regulations would prohibit it, right? Which is, I think, one of the fears that many people have about increasing housing and increasing density. And the list of sites is, fairly robust, and some of them have a fair bit of capacity. One of the more controversial things in the community has been the development of the CCA site and the work that Emory and was it Community Equity Builders have been proposing.
Emerald Fund.
Right.
Emerald Fund, yeah, and Equity Community Builders.
Yeah, I may have said that the nouns wrong, but because it's they pushed the high rise. I think they may have backed off on the high rise side of things. Maybe Myrna can correct me, but we were wondering why they weren't looking to mass timber, A, and B, why they were pushing to a 90-foot height limit when it pushed them into high rise territory. And my take on things, having recently gone and looked at this behemoth that the UC Berkeley is building with a private developer for transfer students right next to your
the Diller, the Harbor House.
the project I tried to buy with you when I was from you when I was a planning director.
Right.
You only wanted like 600,000 for it too.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, 500,000.
Oh, maybe, yeah. At any rate,
My wife is still sore that I didn't sell that to you, but she's gotten over it.
but the question I have is, why would people push to high rise when you're only going 1 story above the limit? In my development experience, if you're going to go high rise, you go to 12 stories minimum if you're doing concrete. You go to 20 or 30 if you're doing steel.
Yeah, you're right about that, and I don't know why they would go to 90 feet, because you get all the costs and none of the benefits.
Right.
So yeah, but it could. There are some tricks you can use to get a 90-foot tall building that's considered a 75-foot tall building for the purposes of the fire code. One example being it's 70. Depends on how your city analyzes the fire code, but it's some places say it's 75 feet to the floor of the last occupied floor, and others say it's to the roof, and so that gets your floor right there. And this 90-foot tall building may be
Yeah, that's pretty diversion. I mean, generally it's the highest occupied floor, but a lot of them, they measure from the lowest point of entry, even if it's like a retail space on an odd
Right,
low
yeah.
corner or something.
So I
Yeah.
want to, Myrna has her hand up. I want to get to Myrna.
Okay,
The issue, at least that I'm aware of, is height. Most folks want to see more development. They want to see some of these sites filled in. They're not opposed to density increases, all that stuff. It's height.
Yeah,
And that's what got the CCA thing when they came in with their 19 stories.
right.
It's now backed off to 8 or 9. What's your view on the height in cities like Rockridge?
Well, Paris has a height limit of 87.5 feet. I would gladly take that for most of our cities.
Mhm.
I do think, however, in places like downtown Berkeley, you've got 12-story buildings there already. I mean, I do think it would be very hard to digest a 17-story or 12-story building on the corner of Rockridge, or on the corner of College and what is that, Ashby?
Claremont.
Claremont, yeah. But I'd love to build that, but I do think it would be very controversial for a very long time. I think it'd be very hard to sell. I would never propose that unless there was some significant change in the state law that would allow it. But
So Patrick, following up on that, one theory I've had about why some of these sites have not been built on, including the triangular site, is that developers just didn't think they could get enough height to make it pencil, because Rockridge has always been a little bit
right,
resistant to that. And, 17 stories, I don't think you need 17 stories, and that would be pretty hard to get. But generally, how much height do you think we do need on these medium-sized sites for it to even be something you would consider, like that would actually that wouldn't lose money?
well, I think you could do a 75-foot building there and find and finance it and build it. The great attraction of Rockridge is that is a wonderful site for empty nesters to sell their $2 million bungalows and move into something they don't have to maintain, be close to their kids, their grandkids, all their circle of friends.
Mhm.
I don't know that rental housing, I don't know if that would justify it, but 75-foot tall building is probably going to be concrete, but you might, with the interesting thing about mass timber is the numbers that we are looking at give you high-rise or mid-rise densities at low-rise costs. I mean, the cost savings, if indeed they are true, could be really significant. And that's why we're really keen on it. But I don't know what they're asking for the Shell site, but my gut tells me that I could build a 75-foot tall building there and finance it, which would probably be the only building that's going to go up in Oakland in the next 3 or 4 years.
And you could finance it now under current conditions with current rents, or, well, I guess you'd sell, it'd be condos, right?
If you sold it as condos, I mean, that location, you might get Cal students too. Cal students pay an astronomical amount to live in a new, safe building.
That actually, I'm glad you said that, because I'm seeing all this development in downtown Berkeley, some of which is you.
Yeah,
And my theory has been, well, you just get a lot more rent per square foot, and that's why it's working right now. Is that
that is
what's
it.
going on?
That is
Yeah,
it.
that's right. We did this at San Francisco State. And we ran the numbers on building 10,000 units, and it was like the 4 students in a 2-bedroom,
Yeah,
right? Or 4 small
That-
bedrooms or something
that
like that.
works.
They're paying market rent in San Francisco.
yeah. And so, I don't know, I mean, I think the general wisdom, and Tom, you probably know this better than anyone, is that for undergrads, we're a little too far, but for graduate students or faculty, we're not too far.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, faculty aren't going to live at the same density that students might.
Right.
yeah. Faculty has cars too, and we typically don't want to build much. We would maybe build some parking there, but we typically avoid building garages if we can avoid it. And
Can I
so,
ask a question about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then after that, Mark, because he's got his hand up, but go ahead, Myrna.
Okay. What is your experience when you don't provide parking? I'm not talking for special populations like students, but just ordinary families. How does it work out if you don't provide parking? Have you had experience with that?
yeah, families typically do not rent our apartments. It's usually what I call what I call the young and the restless, i.e. the 25 to 35-year-olds. But families with kids, very rare to find a family with kids that doesn't want to have a car, or certainly have easy access to a car. Maybe you could get them to do car share or something. But our apartments are expensive. It's very hard unless you've got a, double income family or parents paying, or you're, a high income, or at least moderately high income single person. You probably wouldn't be able to afford one of our apartments. I mean, it's very expensive to, the one silver lining, to the extent there is one, with our current nuclear winter, is the construction prices are coming down quite dramatically.
Oh, that's good. I haven't heard anyone say dramatically yet.
Well, I don't know. I consider 10%, 10 to 15% to be pretty dramatic. That's $50,000 a unit.
So
Starting to work then with the rents you could get or the sales prices you could get?
Well, yeah, there's a chance. I mean, it's not, but it only works in a main location like Rockridge.
Right.
So
Mark, sorry, you've been waiting.
Yes, I like this focus hypothetically on the Shell site, and I might also raise shortly another site. But to just first point, to just clarify, given the existing shape of the site and what you would envision, Patrick, you're basically saying the affordabilities of the units, they wouldn't really be affordable units either. Certainly not for owner occupied, and it would be difficult for rental as well.
Well, owner occupied, yes, but affordable. I don't know what you consider to be affordable, Mark, but I don't know, $2,000 a month or something like that.
Well, I guess these days that begins to reach the upper reaches of affordability.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also assuming that we'd have the usual number of low-income units that are, the set aside in Oakland. I'm not sure what it is. It's 10 to
10% at moderate or 5% at low.
Yeah.
Okay, so that could work into your calculations. Okay,
Yeah.
let's extend it a little. There's some underutilized property. There's some on Claremont Avenue there. There's some stores right up to a church. No one was going to touch the church. I don't know the feasibility. What if that were to become a larger site? I don't know what, factoring in what additional land costs would be, but then you would have a much more sizable, at least.
Yeah, that would help.
twice the size.
There are, I'm glad you mentioned, there are certainly economies of scale. We used to say we wanted to do at least 100 apartments, but that was back in the glory days when interest rates were low and it was easier to build and so forth. Now we're doing smaller sites, among other things. Among other reasons, just to see if we can do it, because I think we're going to see in the immediate Bay Area, I should say, that the bigger sites are much rarer now, and unless there are.
I will say we have 2 or 3 of them in Rockridge, 2 or 3 pretty big sites.
Yeah.
That are
like 4 or 5 acres.
Yeah, multiple hundreds of units. There's the
4 or 5 acres, really? I'm not.
Yeah, the CCA site, the Ridge site, and probably the dialysis center, right on Claremont and whatever that cross street is.
Yeah, that's under a long-term lease, though, isn't it? The dialysis center. I'm pretty sure.
What's that again?
I think that's under a long-term lease, the dialysis center, isn't it?
Yeah, and the Ridge is another issue that we've been dealing with, but there are some large sites, but many more medium and small sites. Louisa?
Let
you-
me raise just a third
go
hypothetical,
ahead.
third variation. Patrick, you may not be aware that the JCC is taking over the Dryers building.
Yes,
and it's
yeah, I know.
gonna have- You know Moses Lebit?
Yeah.
Okay. What, it could be fantasy world in my sense, and we're on a committee, we're liaisons, we're working very constructively
Yeah.
with them in the early stages, and it's going to be a multi-stage project, pretty much sticking to the existing site for the next decade or so. But looking down the line, or maybe even faster, sooner, what about some partnerships? They're not interested in developing housing themselves, but what if some donors could come in some of the acquisition of the sites? And what could then be feasible as a kind of project on that site that would potentially have more affordable units than would otherwise be feasible?
Yeah,
Thinking
I
of a
mean,
partnership. I know they're not thinking of that. I'm not saying, but I keep raising it.
yeah, no, I mean, it's a good idea. It's just, you have to understand, Mark, it costs between 700 and 800K a door to build a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. And there's no way to make that affordable with the current interest rates. You just can't do it. You need to move out to Merced or something where you can build walk-up apartments for $250,000.
Unless you're the University of California.
Unless you're University of California. But as you know, the University of California is no expert at building affordable housing. We always price all of our apartments slightly less than UC charges for its dorm rooms. So
Yeah,
it's
Let me
just
go-
establishment. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
let me go to Louisa. Do we
Sorry,
just
took a
lose-
moment to unmute.
Oh,
Yeah, I just want to sort of, one thing that Patrick said that stuck with me is that there is a big difference in building rental versus home ownership. Like they have different models, and like Rockridge is a place that it is so expensive to buy, but many people want to live. And so there might be like the space for a cheaper place that you could own can command a different price than a rental. So sort of if the economics are a bit different, and so thinking about those as 2 different categories could be helpful in sort of thinking what's possible on these smaller sites too.
Yeah, like the $800,000 townhome or something in Rockridge that would be affordable if interest rates come down a little bit. I mean, interest rates are at 6 or 7% now, but we have to bear in mind they were artificially low for the last 15 years. And if they go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, and the point of if people want to stay in the neighborhood but don't need as much space, sort of we live in this environment where it's hard to shift, but if there is an option for someone to downsize at a certain point in life, but still be able to stay in their community, stay in their neighborhood, there really isn't that option here very much.
I'll point out that if you have lived in a large house worth millions of dollars, but you live there a really long time and your property tax basis is really low, and you buy a new condo, you can take it with you now.
Yeah, take your property tax with you.
Take your property tax basis with you, even though the new thing would have otherwise have a higher basis.
Right, exactly. And that actually is why I think for sale stuff would work in condos, because my mom lives in Rockridge. She lives on Benvenue.
Oh.
And she is still in her house, and she doesn't want to move, but she had, and she's quite old now, but she had dozens of friends that wanted to stick around and sell their house and move into something that wasn't such a headache. But there's nothing available. And I think that is the market that I think is probably the easiest one to sell to someone right now.
Okay.
For Oakland.
Star?
Yeah, I wanted to find out your thoughts. It's clear that in this market, it sounds like things are really expensive, but are there any lots in Rockridge that you know of, or could you tell us what the height and density would need to be in order to actually make something affordable, which I presume would be rental, not for sale?
What do you consider to be affordable? That's, I think we need to establish our terms here.
I don't know exactly what the median is, but I would say, you know, for people who make less than $100,000 a year.
Yeah, okay. So usually the rule of thumb is you take a third of that and 30% of that income and divide it by 12. So 30 grand divided by $2,500 a year, a month, something apartment for $2,500 a month.
Yep, that sounds about right for middle income, moderate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe, depending on your land cost, you could maybe get a small 2-bedroom for that. I mean, we were leasing small 2-bedrooms in San Francisco for $3 grand a month during COVID. And we had a very hard time doing that, but that's San Francisco, that's COVID, that's downtown, South of Market, blah, blah, blah.
And when you say
so-
small, Patrick, like define small.
Like
'Cause
450 square feet. You can look at, by the way, if any of you guys want to take a look and see the kinds of apartments we build, just go to panoramic.com and we've got photographs of our interiors and plans and everything. So,
I mean, one way to get these things to cost less is just to make them really small and really efficient, and that's been your model, right?
that has been our model. Although, you know, our units actually aren't that much smaller than the average apartment in France. I've done some research on that. So
You say a 450 square foot 2-bedroom?
yeah,
That's
Wow.
what I was doing in Hong Kong back in the 80s.
that's what's that?
I was doing those in Hong Kong back in the 1980s, but you know, the bedroom width minimum was 6 feet.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that here.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
where I
you can go on our website and see.
All right, I'll
but,
take a look. Yeah.
I'm curious how many units you would need to do to have something like that. Like what size lot, how many units altogether?
you know, I don't know, 10,000 square foot lot and go up 5 or 6 or 7 stories, I think, probably.
Because I'm mainly thinking of teachers. I mean, that seems to be one of the biggest crises in
Yeah.
Oakland.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you one way you could do that and hit your $2,500 and have slightly bigger units is get property tax waived for 20 years.
Yep.
Mhm.
How do
You
you
know.
do that?
Pardon me?
How do you do that?
Well,
to
the state could do
Sacramento.
it. You have to get a law passed. New York used to do it. I think they've since ended that, but that generated a huge amount of affordable housing at no cost to the cities, apart from the property tax foregone.
So just as
But-
background for people, right now, housing up to 80% of AMI, so lower income, built by a nonprofit only can get their property taxes waived. And what Patrick's talking about is expanding that a bit, which has been talked about for a long time now. And it makes a big difference in terms of how the thing finances, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think saw an article that low income in San Francisco is 104K a year.
Right.
I
Yeah, I
think
saw the same.
it's probably 100% of AMI, but I don't know if anyone's following these numbers.
Oh, yeah, maybe it is.
It's probably moderate.
Yeah.
Do you ever co-develop with affordable housing developers?
Well, we're actually doing a housing project for the homeless and they are doing a master lease. And we're building it, then they're master leasing it for 10 years. And they're getting it for probably half the cost of what the usual nonprofit developer would build it for. I think we're building it for like $360,000 a unit for a tiny studio. But that's half the cost of what supportive housing studios are going for in San Francisco and LA, and in some cases even more than that.
So you mentioned property taxes. What else could this group do? Like, so if this group is saying to you, you know, we would like to see some of these sites built on, we'd like to see more affordability than just the required 5 or 10%. What levers can this group pull or try to pull at the local and state level?
Well, if you could get some kind of pilot for property tax relief, that would be huge. Single staircases is now being proposed, I think, at the legislature, and that's particularly good for building on small sites. One of the things I sent you, Ken, which maybe you can post with the chat room, is that incredible project in Paris that's on the corner. It's a 6-story building. It's a little bigger than you might expect in Brockridge, but it's a remarkably efficient and really attractive building on a 3,500 square foot lot. But it's only, you can only do that with a single staircase.
Is that like a scissor stair? Well, there's actually two paths of it.
It's just a single stairwell.
Okay.
I just put the link, I put the link into the chat just now.
Yeah.
You can just click on that and look at it. You know, I do also want to mention, I don't know if anyone knows what the status of this is, but I think it's is it the Red Cross office building? I forget who the tenant is, and they're right across the street from the Safeway on Claremont. There's that big sort of 70s or 80s office building. I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
That's for sale as well.
On the east side of Claremont, right above college.
Is that east? I was getting my directions confused.
I call it southeast. Yeah.
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 That's a really good site.
Yeah, that would be a great site. That's probably that, if I remember correctly, that's probably a 15 to 20,000 square foot site, right?
Yeah, we have the sales.
Might be more actually with the parking.
I think it's
Yeah.
more. Does anyone remember?
This
I can
land
look.
area, 42,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow.
I'll post the link here, just a moment.
You know, it feels like there's more activity, there's more stuff for sale, there's more things that could happen than have been in the past.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is falling out of escrow. A lot of stuff is coming back on the market. I'm not surprised, but yeah, can you send me that link too? That sounds like that would be a fabulous site. I love that.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
a definite main site.
Maybe I could persuade my mom to move there.
So Casey, if you don't have Patrick, send it to me and I'll send it to Patrick. Or I can find it myself. Other questions? A lot of you are quiet. Please speak up.
Yeah, give them my email if they have any questions they want to ask offline. Patrick at Panoramic.
Okay, I'll actually, let me just put that in the chat now. It's Patrick at panoramic.com.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I had to step out for a bit, so I may have missed this. I'm curious about, the hard to build market rate housing. What about affordable housing? And I guess one question is, density bonuses are great, but if you're doing a 4 or 5 unit project, I mean, that you have to dedicate 1 unit to low income. Just talk about that some.
That's very hard. I think I guess density bonus. Well, actually, there are. I think you can get almost up to 10 units and only have to do 1 low income unit. But if you have to, bear in mind that the general cost of a low income unit is essentially the whole cost of whatever that unit is, because the rents barely cover the operating costs and taxes if you're lucky. So, when you have a low income unit, it's essentially a $600,000 to $800,000 expense to the project, which is a huge number, especially for small projects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Following up on that, Patrick, you said that the cost for this homeless service provider who's going to be master leasing this site from you, are you able to share who that is? And then you said that they are getting it at a lower cost. How did you make that happen?
Well, we're building it. They aren't buying it, they're leasing it. And so their lease is quite a bit less than it would have been if we had to build it. If they had built it for $700K a door, which is the typical cost for supportive housing over here in San Francisco and LA. And we're able to do that because it's a very efficient design. The units are small; they're only 175 square feet. you can see that on our site as well. If you just look at I think city space is 1367.
But also I assume that if you've got a master lease before you start the project, you can make that lease a little cheaper because you've got certainty versus, not versus
Oh,
having. to
yeah.
spec.
Yes. Yeah. And we could get financing and other things.
Right, your money gets cheaper too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that is actually one model. I haven't seen it done very often for a variety of reasons, but you could build something if you got an affordable housing developer to master lease it. Interestingly, we've done some legal research, and if the lease is long enough, or if it has options to go out 35 years, then it's deemed a sale, and you get the property tax waiver. And the property tax waiver is huge. It's like $5,000 a year. It's 40% of the operating expenses of a building, which is a massive number.
Yeah, I've seen Eric Tao, who you probably know, has been talking about this forever. A lot of people have been talking about this.
Yeah, interestingly, if you lease to a university, you can get a property tax.
That's right.
as well.
That's right. So if
A public university, right?
Public university. Actually, I think it just needs to be. I haven't looked at that legislation. It might just be an institution of higher learning, but
Or nonprofit or something. Yeah.
So if
yeah,
you're,
it has to be a nonprofit. You're right. You can't lease to
Good
the
at
Art
Stanford.
Academy. Or
so if
Stanford.
UC wanted to master lease a project that would from you, that
Yeah,
would.
we are doing that now. And
Okay.
yeah, and by the way, we have some 4-bedroom units that are 700 square feet on a building called 2539 Telegraph that you can look online, and they're surprised that too is student housing, but we do have 8 families living in there, and they're Section 8 residents, but I think they're quite happy there.
Allie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, so there's no public subsidy for the construction costs of the homeless housing project you're working on?
No, we're building it with private funds, but the agency that's leasing it is getting money from Measure P, which is a Berkeley tax specifically for housing for the homeless.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a model that we were hoping to duplicate on a larger scale, but it's proven to be extremely difficult for reasons I won't bore you with. But we've been working on it now for almost 5 years, and it's actually going to break ground next month. So
that's great.
Yeah,
I'm working on some.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead, Allie. I didn't mean to.
I was gonna say I'm working on something relatively similar in East Oakland, so I might want to pick your brain on that.
Oh, sure.
at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just ping me. Remind me that we chatted at this Zoom meeting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Myrna, was your hand up from before, or did you have another?
You're on mute, Myrna.
You're on mute.
Everybody would love to see the private market be encouraged or pushed to provide more low-income units, but it doesn't appear that that's going to happen in any significant way. What are your thoughts about what the government role should be in this? I mean, if we're wartime, they would find a way to construct thousands of units. We're not in wartime. So what are your thoughts?
Well, the easiest way to do it and actually spread the burden. The trouble thing about asking the private sector to provide it is you're asking a single developer like myself to bear the burden, which is really a societal burden, and the cost is enormous. We are cursed and blessed to live in the Bay Area. The construction costs here, at least until recently, were the highest in the world, and they're 2x what they are in most European countries. But if the government could simply waive the taxes, reduce the fees in San Francisco are $100K a door. In Berkeley, they're now even higher. If they could eliminate a lot the fees and forgive the property taxes on project, then you would see, I think, a significant amount of development on the private sector. And the private sector, just by its nature, can, I think, build this stuff 25 or 30% or 40% less than the public sector side can do that.
And the thing to remember is on an empty lot or one of these underutilized lots, they're not getting property taxes from that now.
Right.
So, you know, if they would waive them for 20 years or something, it wouldn't be forever, right?
Yeah. 20 years would do the trick. That's what
Yeah.
they do in New York.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
what percentage of low cost housing could be in those units?
Well, typically in New York, it's 20%.
Mm.
Yeah, it's hard to get much below that, and it kind of depends on what you consider low income housing, because low income is, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, it could be below 120, right?
So, you know, it's 120% of AMI, which is, you know, that's probably moderate, and below 80% of AMI is probably would be considered low.
Mm-hmm.
I
And, you
thought,
know, we
well,
can put-
okay, I forget what the methodology is now.
yeah.
But you
Well-
don't think the government should build public housing or social housing or?
Well, I mean, it depends on what government. In Singapore, 80% of people own their houses built by the Singaporean government. Generally speaking, the United States federal government's track record in building public housing is pretty mixed.
Yeah. Chad? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Patrick. I didn't want to cut you off. I want to make sure Chad gets a turn here.
Yeah, I was just thinking, back when I was chair of RCPC, we used to get developers coming, talking about a lot of these sites. And the thinking was, well, the neighbors are going to be against it. But the board was always like, at least in theory, go for it. But it was getting the price of the land down. It seemed like a lot of these sites that are still in play here were held by speculators that were just waiting. And one of them, I think, is the one that's the Baxter now on Broadway and 51st. That was empty for a really long time, and people were always trying to buy it, but get the economics to work was hard. And I think back, Patrick, when you started, you know, it was hard to get financing for these kind of infill projects.
Yeah, no, that has
Berkeley-
changed a lot. That has changed dramatically. And
Yeah.
if people have owned a piece of property for a long time, or they've inherited, it's got a basis of probably zero or peanuts, couple thousand, 10 grand, they're not paying much in property tax. They'll just wait. There's
Yep.
very, very, very little incentive for them to.
I
Yeah,
tried to buy that site from the guy that owned it. He had inherited it. He was making bank on the billboard.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
right.
the dialysis site was empty for a long time. And before anything went there, this was Jim Falashi. It's an old Oakland
Oh, yeah.
developer from way back, a family. And he said, we get all of our costs are totally covered by the billboard.
Right.
What are you going to pay me to cover that cash flow and just have the appreciation grow enough to convince me to my family members to sell it? Because it's
Yeah.
just
Well, that's
too
That's
easy.
very true. Very true. So very often you just have to wait till the kids inherit and they want to get the cash, and they don't want to, they want to do something with it. That's often what happens, at least in my experience.
We'll take a couple more. Mark?
Yes, I want to go back to that site across from Safeway, that large site.
Yeah.
It is for sale
Uh-huh.
and it's 42,000, like apparently square feet. It's going to be how a project is configured on that would be of interest to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it really is it's a more realistic target for doing something in Rockridge right now.
Yeah.
What do you see as potentially feasible, taking into account some of the concerns that have been raised in this discussion, but being realistic about having some reasonable percentage of affordability built into whatever is done in there? And also, I think in terms of both the neighborhood and the Rockridge board, there is very much a high priority on wanting to develop more housing here. It's all going to be the way it's done, what the various impacts are going to be, but it's not going to be necessarily one of any of total, opposition, no matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just off the cuff, I think that would be a great senior housing site, because senior housing doesn't require much parking, if any. It's close enough so that people could walk to restaurants and the
And Bart.
Way and BART and everything else. And it's close to a very large market, I think, of people that are ready to sell their single family homes. And on top of that, you can transfer your historic tax basis as well. Although typically senior housing is not for sale, but you know, perhaps something like that. Or conventional condos or townhouses or some variation on the theme.
Would that be something you would be interested in doing?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that has economies of scale. It's got good access. Workers love
Safeways across the street.
Safeways across the street. Yeah.
That's probably the best site currently available in Rockridge. I mean, the bigger ones are just take a lot more work, but that's a great site.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting site. We looked hard at a gas station up on Ashby in Claremont, but the guy ultimately decided not to sell it. And so I am pretty familiar with that area. My mom lives over on Benvenue at Ashby. So
You think you could convince the DMV to get rid of their site or go inside the building?
Well, you know, they're doing it in San Francisco.
Right.
Are you aware of that, Patrick?
Oh, I know that you're right. They're selling it or they're moving it into an existing structure? The one out in the avenues?
It's actually not in the avenues, it's in the Haight. It's the only DMV in San Francisco, and the DMV has finally agreed. I tried when I worked for the city, I tried to get the DMV and they just told me to go to hell. But they've actually agreed, I think pushed by the governor, to keep the DMV there, but allow a house, basically just configure it, so housing can get there too.
Yeah, actually, given the travails of ground floor retail, the DMV might be
Great tenant, right?
Marquee use.
Yeah, right. And long lease. And the DMV site is right next to the dialysis site, which I think is a former Lucky's grocery store site.
Yeah.
I think that site might be 30 or 40,000 square feet, and the two of them together might be 80 or 100.
Yeah, more than that, I think.
And
it's
they back
about
up
100.
they back up to Frog Park. Yeah, I mean, we have to find another place for the farmer's market, but we could do that.
Yeah.
Bart would be a good candidate.
Yeah.
When I was on the board, the DMV was going to rebuild, tore down the old building and was going to rebuild the new. If we'd had enough time, we had Jane Bruner convinced that she could get them to go to another site. They wouldn't hear of mixed use development, but it was too far along in their process before they even notified the neighbors. It's only because they had to cut down trees.
Oh yeah.
But, I was all still really sad that we missed that chance back then.
Oh yeah, that's too bad.
And last but not least, there's the BART site, and BART is starting to actively look at that site. I have my doubts about whether it's really physically feasible, but I don't know if you've looked at that.
Yeah, I used to work at BART, believe it or not, back in the mid '80s. Yeah, I had to work. I had a fellowship at MIT that obligated me to work in a public sector job for 2 years, and I did it at BART. And I proposed developing that site, and they said forget it. So I gave up. But the BART site's too problematic. I think it'd just be a very hard place. You spend a huge amount of time and not get much out of it. These larger sites would be much more promising, I think. Besides, dealing with BART is like dealing with the Politburo, and there's no Stalin at BART, so you can't get cut through it all.
I thought you had said that about the city of Berkeley. I seem to remember talking to you years ago when we first met in San Francisco, and you made the same statement about the city of Berkeley.
I've changed. Well, we have Gorbachev's took over Berkeley.
They've changed a lot. I mean, Berkeley's been really pro-housing the last few years.
Yeah, Berkeley's, I tell people I predicted the revival of downtown Berkeley. I just happened to have the wrong century. But it's happening now. I think Berkeley's going to be in for a very good run. And I think Rockridge could kind of follow that as well, because the Brockridge is one area of Oakland that I think still has great promise.
You know, I just walked Broadway today, back and forth down to MacArthur and back twice,
Yeah.
Broadway Terrace. And there are a lot of sites sitting there looking like they're waiting to be developed, or maybe I don't think there's plans filed, but there's some pretty big sites. Part of it used to be the Toyota like used car lot, and another part.
Yeah.
There's some really big sites along Broadway between was it 580 and in Broadway Terrace or College Avenue. You could put a ton of housing along that street.
Yeah. Right now though, Tom, new apartment buildings in Oakland are selling for well below replacement value. 1550 Alice just traded for $500K a door, and it was a beautiful building. And there are a couple other comps like that right now. I mean, that will change, obviously.
You're saying that they're selling for less than it would cost to develop one?
A lot less. Yeah. And we have a huge site over in next to the West Oakland BART station, and we are not. It's probably going to go back to the bank, and it's approved for a huge build project, but nobody is willing to underwrite Oakland right now.
Is that because of the crime spree?
It's a combination of things. Overbuilding, departure of businesses, the crime's certainly bad too. So.
But you think that Rockridge might be an exception, that you could get financing for something in Rockridge?
I think you'd have a chance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll leave it on that note.
I had one.
Sure. All right. One last question. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on how we can end up with buildings that are more aesthetic and more architecturally interesting, because so much of what I see when I drive around Berkeley or down down Telegraph and everything are these faceless, just terrible. It's unfortunate that they've been built, but I realize it costs more to build something that is more aesthetic. But so I wonder what your thoughts are about how that can be come about.
Well, a simple way would just be require developers to hire Kirk Peterson.
I don't know how many Petras we want in our neighborhood.
That's true. But yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, that's very hard. It's possible. Well, one thing, if you had for sale buildings, you would get better looking buildings than rentals. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Because the tension on cost is much greater on rentals than it is on for sale, where obviously you want to have people excited about their design. And so I think that's the easiest way I can think of offhand here. It's really tough.
Patrick, are rentals always condo map now? Is that like standard practice? 10 years later?
It kind of varies. In some places, you can't get a general contractor to build it if you put a condo map on it. So
because of liability.
Yeah.
Oh. But I think Kristen's point is a good one. I think a lot of reaction to new housing is that it's a little bit brutal, right?
It is brutal. It's by John King, who I like a lot, but I'm very glad he has never reviewed any of my buildings. Has identified the tension, which is reconciling the incredible high cost of construction with a desire to have a aesthetically memorable building. It's tough.
Or at least aesthetically pleasant. It doesn't have to be memorable, just pleasant, right?
Yeah, pleasant. Yeah, but Kirk, I mentioned Kirk and Jess, but he did three. Kirk, I think you did 3 buildings for me, right? And I think they've held up pretty well.
Yeah, I've never really been able to get any client to really tell me how much more it costs to do what I do. It's just they can hardly tease it out, but it's a couple percent. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the problem is since the second half of the 20th century, architecture schools, I don't know what they teach people anymore. It's certainly not proportion or aesthetics.
Yeah.
Talk to the community.
Well, at the risk of everyone getting mad, I just got back from London where I saw the Barbican. Has anyone seen the Barbican in London? And that's a brutalist, famous brutalist development, and I actually really liked it. So there you
Oh,
go.
really? Okay.
Well, yeah, you can go look at the FBI headquarters in Washington. My experience in building housing for the last 50 years or 40 years, it's just a matter of where you pay attention. You
Yeah.
can make really good housing and build it at regular rates, on budget, on time.
Yeah.
You just got to pay attention to the quality of design up front from the beginning. And then you did some stuff along Shattuck, right? Isn't the one where you went over to the theater and you just sort of an Art Deco-ish kind of thing?
Yeah.
Wasn't that
South Beach comes to Shattuck.
Yeah.
That was not bad. I think
Is
that
that
was,
you, Patrick? That was Dan Solomon was the architect, right?
yeah, that was our building, the Fine
I
Arts.
didn't realize you were the developer of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that had character.
Yeah. I think that's held up pretty well.
And was that more expensive than the other buildings?
Not particularly, no.
Right?
So,
That's
yeah.
my point. It's just where you pay attention,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and design review, I mean, I don't know whether, I mean, Oakland does, I thought they had some kind of design review for staying, like for my house, you know, within the pattern of the craftsman. But this leads to the whole question of everything I see is for lease. I don't see condos for sale that anybody who owns a house would want to move into.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take on a rental unit where I have no control over the future cost.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, frankly, there haven't been that many really lovely condos built in the East Bay. I mean, there've been some over in Jack London Square, maybe a few on Broadway, but not many. I'm not aware of any Berkeley resident that moved to Oakland to live in a condo, at least.
Do you build condos, Patrick?
No.
Yeah,
no.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Weren't some built in Piedmont?
Oh, yeah, but yeah, the ones that were built in Piedmont, it's interesting, it was the old substation there, right on Linda. That was actually bought by a group of 8 college friends. And their families. So all 8 of them, I think there were 8 or 10 there. They were all bought by one group. But
Seven houses.
7? Yeah, okay.
Was that up near the cemetery?
No.
It's my project.
Oh, is it really? Yeah, great project.
Is that up near the cemetery, Glenn?
Yeah, I designed that one.
Nice. It's very nice.
Yeah,
It's on Linda off Grand,
right.
Lower Piedmont.
Yeah, no, we had fun with that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, we took the common driveway, made it into a public square on the inside of the project.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great project, but that's the only one that I'm aware of in Piedmont.
Yeah.
So I missed something earlier. You were saying something about not being able to build, if you build condos on property, you couldn't also have rental, or maybe I misunderstood
It's the
that.
condo map question. Maybe you can explain that, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, typically developers, even of rental housing, will put a condo map on it, i.e. divide up all the apartments so that if they want to convert it to condominiums downstream, typically 10 years, they can do that. Because you can't get a condo map on an existing apartment building, if I understand the Subdivision Map Act. So as a potential for converting a apartment building to condominiums, you get a condo map early on at the beginning of the project, and then you put it in a drawer and then bring it out in year 11 if you want to try to sell the apartments as condos.
That has to do with the statute of limitations for construction liability.
Construction deflect.
You
Yeah.
can't be sued after year 10, yeah.
Right.
Because what I had recommended to Emerald Fund very early on was exactly, y'all were talking about the people in Rockridge and Piedmont wanting to stay in the neighborhood, but would like to be in a nice condo and not have the care. And I said, okay, you should be building, they can be expensive, but condos across the upper part of that property, the CCA property, and then down below, put affordable housing. down there in the, in the front corner there.
I mean, you typically won't mix them in the same building, but they're,
No, not the same building. I'm
Right,
talking about
different
like,
buildings.
imagine if building B, the one that goes across the back, but a variation, something more interesting, right? If that was condos, and then you just had a building down in front that was low income, that was rental,
Yeah,
right?
I'm
Because
not,
there are people that would like to have to, to stay in the neighborhood.
all right, I think we want to give Patrick back the rest of his evening. So thanks everyone very much. Patrick, thank you very, very much. See you,
my
Rock-
pleasure. Nice chatting with you all.
Rockridge is not a place you should be afraid of. Come visit us anytime.
Okay.
Stop by and see your mom afterwards.
Oh, yeah, good. No, that would be one big advantage of developing in Rockridge. I could
Right.
go have lunch with my mom more often, which
Absolutely.
I need to do.
All right, I'm gonna send you the sales thing for that parcel across from Safeway.
Yeah, send me any prospects and I'll tell you what I think of them if you'd like.
Sure, we will do
All
that.
right. All right. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you. Thanks,
talk
everyone.
later.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
Good to
everyone.
see you.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Good night.